Hello and welcome back to episode 72 of the Sports Brief Podcast. Special guest Joe Price again, my big buddy from Canvia News Center 1. Great to have you on again, my man. I would say top Cowboys fan that I have ever had on the show, and maybe the top one that I've ever met that's the most realist. Joe, it's always great to have you on. Thank you for coming on, my man.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be here, especially when I can be brought back to do a victory lap for somewhat correctly predicting the outcome of the Super Bowl.
Yes. And, we're going to get right into that in just a second. But before we do, we're going to make sure those of you that watch us on YouTube, we're going to ask you guys to make sure to like and subscribe down below. Leave a like and a comment. Helps people find the show. We post a video every day. So, and we're starting to get into a lot of different teams, not just the Vikings, Packers, and Cowboys. So those of you that do watch us on YouTube, please make sure to subscribe to get our latest takes on your favorite team. We have to start here with Joe. He did... we were going into the Super Bowl. I predicted a Kansas City win, a high-scoring affair that just didn't work out that way. That's not how the Super Bowl worked out. So, Joe, I'm going to give you this time to go over, your prediction that you had made on the last episode, and just really, I'm going to give. This is your time.
Oh well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity for this forum. Looking back on it, it doesn't seem nearly as bold prediction as it was, but going into the game, I think most people were in agreement with you that Kansas City looked to be the best team on paper and had the best chance of winning, and I think everyone who even like yourself who predicted they would win thought it would be a high scoring game, and I predicted a Tampa Bay win, but I thought it was going to be like a 38-35 kind of win. Which was not in any way, shape, or form what we saw. Yeah, I mean, it's been talked to death. You've talked about it here on the show plenty, but it's very interesting going forward. For Tampa Bay, I don't count them out of tilting for it next year, being a very strong contender for it next year, but I feel like every team in the league that has to face Kansas City next season, especially the teams that are playing them twice in their division, are going to study that Super Bowl and make the next season for the Chiefs very difficult for them. Because it's a big deal to lose the Super Bowl in and of itself, but the way in which they lost the Super Bowl, where they were shut down just completely, I think that's going to have a pretty lengthy effect on their season going forward in 2021. Most teams have a hangover after the Super Bowl. I think we talked about this a little bit on the episode we recorded right before the Super Bowl. Most teams that lose anyway, the last 5 of them didn't make the playoffs the following year. And the only team that did go back and win the Super Bowl the year after losing one was, of course, Tom Brady and the New England Patriots in their last victory against the Rams. So, yeah, it was fun. I enjoyed the Super Bowl more than most people did. I think a lot of people were bored by it and annoyed, and I get why. But as far as Tom Brady victories goes, I mean, he put on a clinic, and that defense put on a clinic, and it was as fun to watch for me as the Super Bowl where the Broncos lost to the Seahawks. That was a fun. I didn't have a rooting interest in that. It was just kind of sometimes an uneven Super Bowl can still kind of be interesting in its own way. I don't think I'll watch it again, but yeah, that's my 2 cents about about Super Bowl 55.
And me and Tristan kind of covered on the last episode, but I just didn't think it would end up like that. No, nobody really did, if we're being honest with ourselves. And you're right. I think this could potentially change how teams continue to play the Chiefs in the future, and it's going to be really interesting to see what happens next year. I mean, I off the top of my head, I consider them still a playoff team, but at the same time, if this Super Bowl is any indication of next year, you never know. This does not make a strong case for them because I will say I don't put a lot of blame on Patrick Mahomes, nearly none, to be honest with you. Because I think I even told you when I came into work one day, I told you the man was literally parallel to the ground and had to make a throw. Like I would say there are maybe 5 quarterbacks all time in terms of arm talent and vibrato, how they carry themselves. Just quarterbacks, maybe 5 all-time quarterbacks that could make that throw. Maybe even less than that now that I think about it. But
that could be the greatest effort by a Super Bowl losing quarterback in history. I mean, Kurt Warner for the Cardinals kind of comes to mind, but that was a close game. Like
that was a fun game.
It's hard to quantify effort when Mahomes doesn't score a touchdown the whole game, but it never looked like it was any. I mean, he delivered so many passes directly to the helmet of his receivers, and they just couldn't catch them.
Yep.
The guys that had been reliable all season long just didn't show up for whatever reason. There's plenty of theories about that, but I think ultimately the defense, the Tampa Bay defense, just exploited their weaknesses so well that they just didn't play with confidence for that. 3.5 quarters of that game felt like, because it kind of felt done before the half. In a lot of respects.
In a way, yeah, it really did. I don't know. It was kind of crazy
with anyone but Patrick Mahomes, because he's made so many crazy comebacks before. So it just kind of felt like the same, the Rocky theme kind of building up, and he'd just take 40 punches straight in a row and then somehow deliver that knockout, but it just never happened.
No.
Again, we keep agreeing about this, but an outstanding performance from him that just didn't quite deliver. For all those reasons.
By the way, Chelsea Dickens, our former coworker, is on. She just commented saying, "Oh my gosh, Joe did a stream. That man always deserved a podcast." So we got a lot of love out for Chelsea out there. Appreciate you watching, Chelsea. But I had to mention that comment. So I had to give you this opportunity to really come out because anytime someone comes on our podcast and is right about something, we try to give them the opportunity to gloat, maybe not gloat, but just be like, "Yo, hey, I got this right. Give me my credit, and let's walk away from this." So, it was I was wrong. I could not have been more wrong about this. I think a lot of people were, just based on how it was all season, and I think that's something we've seen a lot of, shockingly, in the Super Bowl, is things just don't work out like we thought they would when it comes to the biggest game of the year. So I don't know what it means for the Chiefs moving forward, but I do know what we're going to go into next, and that's going to be us talking about the Carson Wentz trade. Now, to give you guys a little bit of a background before we get into this, Carson Wentz was traded to the Indianapolis Colts for a 2021 third-round pick and a conditional 2022 second-round pick. That could turn into a first-rounder on a couple of different conditions. Number one, Carson Wentz would have to play 75% of the Colts' offensive snaps for it to be a first-round draft pick, or he would have to play 70% of the snaps, and the Colts have to reach the playoffs. So, in this, truly, he's going to play 75% of the snaps, even if he's in there as a decoy or something. If you're the Colts, you find a way to make that man play 75% of the snaps, even if he's not your starting quarterback, which he probably is going to be. And I think it could be definitely almost a resurging time in his career. When you think about, I've seen so many memes about Carson Wentz the last couple of days, really the last couple of months, about how, he had one bad season and a team that was utterly awful, like injury-ridden, receivers that couldn't catch the football, basically no running game. And I know Jalen Hurts came in and did some things, but that was because NFL teams didn't have tape on this man. When they had tape on him, he just he wasn't as nearly, wow as he was when he first came in. So at the end of the day, I really think it was kind of an indication of how the team he was on, and I think he's going to he could very well destroy teams on the Indianapolis Colts. Joe, what was your reaction when you texted me right away?
Peals of laughter. Peals of laughter, because I feel like it's it's an L for the Eagles organization, because they didn't get what they wanted for him in any sense. And that's always satisfying to me. I think it's a really poor decision by the Colts. I have never been impressed with Carson Wentz. I've watched him. I watched him light up Division I college football, where the defenses move a little bit faster than they do in high school.
Yep.
But not quite so fast as in the upper tier of college football,
SEC,
or the SEC, and certainly not the speed that they move in the NFL. And I think he's always been. I compare him to. Well, he was drafted the same year as
Jared Goff and all them.
Jared Goff. Okay, yeah, I felt he and Jared Goff were criminally overrated. And they did some things in their tenures with their teams that drafted them, but I always thought they were kind of dumber than people. That's not a nice thing to say, but they had less football intelligence than maybe people thought they did, because of where they played in college, and kind of inflated their prospects somewhat.
Yeah, absolutely.
And let's see here. I have some notes about Carson Wentz. So I've always thought he was kind of a joke with the Eagles. He never won a playoff game for them, you know. And that organization has run off. They ran off everyone who was responsible for their Super Bowl win before they ran Wentz off, when he was clearly an albatross for the team. Didn't get along with his teammates, wasn't very popular, kind of a diva, apparently, which is surprising.
But honestly, it's surprising.
But that's his reputation. So maybe he can turn over a new leaf, and kind of hone what leadership qualities he probably has. I mean, you don't get to that status in the NFL without having some, gift for that or talent for that. But I don't know that the Colts organization is going to do him any favors. I mean, they never gave Luck any of the tools he needed, and he retired pretty soon after signing a contract.
Yep,
if I'm not mistaken. And so if they weren't willing to provide a special player like Andrew Luck, and for the majority of his career, Peyton Manning, who often had to will that team to playoff wins, regular season wins and playoff wins, with almost no protection up front, and fewer resources than a lot of other quarterbacks. So I just don't think the Colts organization is that capable or interested in providing Wentz with the tools he's going to need. So I think even if they attempt to do the 75% of snaps or more, he'll be hurt long before that. I mean, I think it's going to be a very similar fate to the one he suffered in Philadelphia. And maybe there was a place he could have gone that he would have thrived in the NFL. Maybe he's not a hack like I think he is. That I'm just biased to think he is because he was the Eagles quarterback. And things played out the way they did. Who knows? But I certainly don't think the Colts are an improvement. It feels like a lateral move. And considering where the rest of the AFC South is going, I don't know that the Colts are poised to just have the benefit of playing in a mostly terrible division for as many seasons as previous Colts teams have had, because the Colts are lucky in the AFC South to have kind of great inflation the way the Patriots have had in the AFC East for 2 decades. I mean, every once in a while, those other 3 teams punch back, but mostly they've had consistency of certain dominance. So yeah,
I think you brought up a lot of good points. One thing I'd like to bring up though is the Colts are actually kind of an intriguing team, if you ask me. A couple of reasons. Number one, I'm about to go from left to right their offensive line and kind of tell you. Now, I know this is annoying. I really do know this is annoying. But I know that this is also it's important to know where a team is coming from and in terms of what weapons they have, what offensive line they have for a quarterback that's coming in who had nothing but problems in that regard when it came to the Eagles, or as you put it, the Eagles. So I think if you're a Colts fan, you should be very excited because I'm going to go from left to right here. Starting left tackle, I mean, you got guys like Chaz Green, who played pretty well in spot duty last year. You got Quentin Nelson, who's vastly underrated. Ryan Kelly, Mark Glowinski, Braden Smith. Their offensive line is very respectable, and I think they're going to keep him upright for a large portion of games. And I think that's going to be very big because there were times, if you watch the Eagles, there were times when that Carson Wentz was under duress and had to find a receiver, which, by the way, it was very, very hard to do with the receiving core that he had. Now, I think that there's some definitely good receivers on the Eagles, but there just wasn't as much magic as there was in the 2017 season. But at the end of the day, I do expect that Carson Wentz, now he's got a running game. That could be said that there was no running game in Philadelphia. I mean, you think about a guy like Jonathan Taylor, who ran for over 1,100 yards last year, 12 touchdowns. If you've got a solid running game and all Carson Wentz has to do is make a couple of spotty throws a game, I think he could at least do that to revive his career. I mean, to at least make throws off play action and to be able to do that, I think he can very, very at least do that. I mean, you got guys like, again, there were some promising players on the Eagles, of course. Guys like Miles Sanders, who ran for over 860 yards and 6 touchdowns. And guys like Greg Ward, who led the team. Get this. Greg Ward led the team with 53 catches and 6 touchdowns, averaged 7.9 yards per catch. Dallas Cowboys was second on the team with 46. Go Jackrabbits. So from top to bottom, this team, it even had guys like Jalen Reagor, who I thought was really going to do something special in the NFL. I think he's still going to be a very special player. But let's be real about this. The Eagles don't have the defense. They don't have the running game. They don't have the offensive line that the Colts do. So those three factors right there, I think, could very well help Carson Wentz revive his career.
Yes, they have better. You're saying a nicer version of I guess the point I'm trying to make.
Yep.
Which is. I guess I know less about the Colts than I thought before, but I still feel like I know enough of their patterns to kind of opine.
No, I got to stop you.
Somewhat with insurance. What's that?
I'm just going to stop you for 1 second because you actually did bring up a good point. They will not bring in like those bigger scale players, and that was a problem Peyton Manning had. I think in terms of their wide receivers, the Colts really haven't brought in somebody that is truly what I would consider like a superstar player. Now I see Michael Pittman as being a big guy, name guy as his career goes on. But like you said, they don't bring in those big name wide receivers, those big name targets for their quarterbacks.
And with Wentz, I will give him his due respect. He is a serviceable quarterback. He is an NFL caliber quarterback, but he, like any good NFL quarterback, he needs a certain number of things to go his way. He is not a transcendent NFL quarterback. And the only quarterbacks that have had success in that organization have been transcendent quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. So I think you're right. I think it could go well for him. Things appear to be going right with the team. It's really hard to say because a lot of what's going to happen in the NFC South this season is really up in the air. There's a lot of trades, or sorry, not the NFC, the AFC South. There's a lot of trades. There's a lot of potential draft stuff. We have some of it coming up later, which we can get into. Mm-hmm. From what you're describing, yeah, from a team standpoint, if that roster stays intact, he could be successful. I will grant you that. But it really depends how the rest of that division looks this going forward in this season to see how it works. And, every other weird little variable that can undo a team's entire season. That's
true. That's a very good way of putting it. No, I think, again, just based on his you make the point. I think that the biggest thing here is you really have to look at and take away from this is they've got the offensive line in the running game and the defense. Now, after I'm looking at some of their wide receivers, I just looked it up. It looks like T.Y. Hilton is going to be a free agent in 2021, I believe, from what I saw. So I think that when you go back and look at this, he was probably basically their biggest deep threat that they had. So you hope a guy like that Pittman will come out and absolutely ball, and I believe he will. But again, at the end of the day, I think that if they do want him to do well, I do think they're Super Bowl contenders, but they have to make some moves in free agency in the draft to be able to get him some weapons, because a running game can only take you so far. And Carson Wentz is talented, in my opinion, as I think he is. He's got a great arm. Michael Pittman, Zach Pascal, those guys, I don't think they're truly a number one wide receiver. I did like what I saw from Mo Cox, who I believe was a free agent tight end that made his mark in the NFL as the season wore on. So, and very impressed with what I saw from him. But I think at the end of the day, they need to make some moves and try to find a way to get him some weapons, because I think that's really going to be what it's going to come down to. So with that, let's jump into our segment 3 here, talking about fixing our team's most glaring need. The first most important thing, I think, is, and if you don't feel comfortable doing this, Tristan kind of was a little bit off and on when he did it, but he got all 5 of them. What do you think your top 5, 1 to 5, your biggest needs are as a Dallas Cowboy fan? Number 1, most glaring need.
Cornerback.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2, safety. Number 3, edge rusher.
Mm-hmm.
Number 5. Wait, did I skip one?
No, you said
A, 2, 4, and pound sign. Cornerback, safety, edge rusher. I would say maybe a middle linebacker whose knees aren't made out of graham crackers. Like kind of a captain for that, and that there's a lot of places the 5th one could go. So, but it would probably be another defensive player, just probably someone who could shore up the D line. Because unless I could also go. We need 5, 5-star backup offensive linemen if we're not going to invest in the defense at all, which Jerry has a tendency not to do. But everybody's clamoring for defensive players. I think that's the order in which we need them. I think the secondary has the most problems. Then the line, and then Sean Lee is it's great to have him on the team when he's there. But he just can't stay healthy, and he's never been able to. And that seems to be a curse, that position for the Cowboys for the last 25 years or so. We just haven't had that guy.
In the middle.
Yeah. Who kind of captains that defense. So
those are the 5.
Those are the 5.
Okay. So, and then I think, and I've stated this for the Vikings. So those of you that I put out our 5 most biggest needs for the Vikings. So if you guys want to check out that video's out on our YouTube channel as well. But for me, I think there's a lot of things that the Vikings need, but we're going to stick with the Cowboys here. Can you kind of just tell me, if number 1 is corner, what really do you think is how do you fix your teams in terms of how do you fix your biggest need? Excuse me.
I think that it's got to be a free agent. I notice you try not to step on your own next question, but I bring it up because it's relevant. A lot of people who have made mock draft picks for the Cowboys, they got the 10th pick in the first round, and a lot of them have them taking a cornerback in that first round. And I can talk specifically about who some of those players are, but I feel like a veteran, preferably a shutdown quarterback, and I'll just say Patrick Peterson's the guy, my ideal pick. I feel he could be not to throw around the word transcendent too much in this show, but he wouldn't be a Deion Sanders level game changer, but I feel like he could change the structure of that defense enough just by shutting down half of the field.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something they could desperately use because they just have too many weaknesses all over in the defense. Also, we drafted a cornerback last year.
Mm-hmm. Trayvon Diggs, I believe, from my memory.
Yep. I always know it's Diggs, but I always get his first name wrong because of his slightly more well-known brother.
Yes.
The former Viking.
Yeah. Yes.
I really liked watching him this last season. I think we talked about it before in previous episodes. Like he's made a lot of rookie mistakes, but he's a great physical player and he plays smart and he's learning and by the end of the season, he was taking balls away. I think got a couple
of weeks, looks like, yeah.
Yeah, and that's something that like the defense just hasn't done in Dallas for so long, and which is odd because it used to be such a people always remember the offense of the 90s teams, but the defense just the reason they were dominant for the 4-year period they won 3 Super Bowls is because they were taking the balls away from every other team.
Yep.
So having and I think that between Diggs and a veteran, bringing in a veteran, Patrick Peterson being the ideal, but I mean there are a few other guys floating out there. I think it would be better to draft a safety or draft an edge rusher than to draft another corner and have 2 young unless there was another, well, there's never going to be another Deion Sanders, but
no. But,
sorry, go ahead.
No, my thing is free agency it's kind of rough if you ask me, because there are times when it happens. We'll take the cornerback this year's cornerback group for example. You've got 5 guys, the top 5 cornerbacks respectively, and arguably are both over 31 years old, or excuse me. AJ Boye, I think is how you say his name. He's 30 years old, so they're over at least 30 years old. They are coming off seasons in which they were most of them were okay. I mean, Patrick Peterson is not his normal self. When you get to that certain age, it's kind of old for a corner. Like the main value you're probably going to provide is a guy that really just kind of shows your younger corners how it's done. In terms of coaching them up and helping them with technique and playbook and all that and scheme fit and everything. So. I mean, just the top 5 guys right there are all guys that, quite honestly, I just don't think that they are. You're not going to get a lot. You're not going to get 5 years out of them, and I think that, and they're not in their prime, clearly. So if you even look at a guy, I'll say this, and I'll let you go, my man. Michael Davis. No, you're fine. I know you've got a good point coming. I just got to make this one last one. Is that Michael Davis? I mean, he's the only guy that I think maybe even debatably in his prime. And I mean, you still got guys like. Garon Holly out of Houston, but still not really anybody that's 26. Even Kevin King, I don't think anybody wants to take a chance on him after that NFC Championship game with the Bucs. But I would say Davis is the only player that's 20 in that 26 range that still got some stuff left that could really provide your team with 4, maybe 5 good seasons left. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I don't disagree, except I don't know that the Cowboys are looking for 4 or 5 seasons. I think Jerry Jones, I would assume, has taken notice of what the Buccaneers were able to do in one season. They took a bubble contender, a distant afterthought team, and pumped enough short-term strength into it to just power through to the Super Bowl and look so good doing it that it's, I think they could do it next year too. Mm-hmm. I think if any team is capable of doing something like that, it's the Cowboys. Just because of Jerry's kind of flamboyance and inferiority complex. I think that's why bringing in a veteran especially a big splash kind of veteran, would be a solid move if he's serious about winning a Super Bowl. And there's a lot of questioning among Dallas Cowboys fans if Jerry even cares about it. He's got the most valuable team in sports, not just in the NFL. So I'm not sure if it's worth it to him to put the pieces together to power through to the Super Bowl. Maybe selling jerseys and belt buckles and hats and T-shirts and wrestling masks is, the only thing that's surprised. Although I'm pretty sure that one I bought in Mexico is not a official Dallas Cowboys object. That's the eternal question with Jerry. So I mean, if he's serious about it, shoring up the defense, you'd have a team that is just as capable of winning a Super Bowl as the Bucs were the last year, I think. And maybe that's just my eternal overestimating of their prospects, but they do get to the divisional round every couple of years or so. So there's something to that. It's they could. It's not hopeless for them. No, it's just sus, I guess, as the kids like to say.
Yes, my generation definitely. So for the Vikings, I got to be very clear about something. K1 Short was just released by the Panthers, the Carolina Panthers, earlier this week, and a guy that has 32.5 career sacks, a two-time Pro Bowler, has only played, I believe, in 5 games off the top of my head through the last 2 seasons because of shoulder surgeries. I think the Vikings have to make a move for K1 Short. And I think it all starts because of the fact that, Shamar Stephen is probably on the way out. Jaleel Johnson was in his final year in his rookie deal, and I think he's definitely gone. So K1 Short is a guy, a 6'3", 315, that's a guy that at East Chicago Central High School, I think that's really going to do a lot. And a former Purdue Boilermaker, I think, is actually the mascot for Purdue. I think he's going to be a guy that the Vikings should definitely go after because he's up there. Yes, he's up there in age. He's 32. But in terms of being able to stuff the run, being able to do his thing, I think he's going to be a special player. And he's still clearly he's going to be a special player, but he's still got a little bit more left in the tank. I think more specifically because of those 2 seasons in which he spent he was injured, yes, and usually shoulder surgeries and those type of injuries they do linger. But if he can get those corrected, not playing for 2 seasons, I think it almost it's not great for the body, but in terms of rest, rejuvenating your body in one of the most toughest sports in the entire NFL, I think it could maybe do him some good. Maybe he could come out and provide some value for the Vikings. Once again, 32.5 career sacks. Even was, I believe, off the top of my head, it was either 2015 or 2016 that the Panthers made the Super Bowl and had 11 sacks in 2015, 6 the year after that. So I think if you're looking for a guy that really can just provide a lot of value at maybe at relatively a low cost in free agency, the Vikings have to go after K1 Short, especially because of the holes they have at defensive tackle. Because this is my thing, Joe. If they don't address defensive tackle in the draft as heavily as I think they do, I truly feel that they need to at least put something into free agency, like whether it's getting one impact player or one player that can at least hold down the fort for another year before next year's draft. So I think that at the end of the day, you can't put it all on this draft. That's just so much pressure you put on Rick Spielman and the picks that the Vikings do have, because they have to hit. If they want to make some noise this year, they pretty much have to hit on all of them. So I think for the amount of needs I think the Vikings have this year. So at the end of the day, I think the Vikings have to take a shot here on K1 Short. I think he's going to be pretty cheap, probably in that that $3 to $8 million range. I think he could definitely do some things. Not taking a couple years off, but injured the last couple years. I think it'll be an important offseason for him to get his mind right, get things moving again, get his shoulders strong again, and just come out and just start eating people again, just doing his thing. What he's best known for, just getting after the quarterback, stopping the run, and doing his thing. And he was an integral part of the Panthers Super Bowl run a while back. So I think he's still got a little bit left in the tank, and I think he's the player. There are some people telling me, okay, well, Adonican Sue, maybe, but you got to remember, he just won a Super Bowl with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I don't think he's going to be leaving Tampa Bay. I think he's going to try to, maybe ante up for another year. He's also 34, so that's another thing you have to consider. So at the end of the day, again, it's really tough to find these guys that are, younger, still in their prime. I mean, you got guys that are at 28, 29, maybe have a couple of seasons left. But for a long term, I think the Vikings need to take a chance on a guy like K1 Short, maybe even a guy like Robertson Harris from the Bears. But there's really few guys that I would really want to sign right off the bat, because I think that at the end of the day, the Vikings have to address it in the draft, and we'll get into that a little bit later. And I'll start here. With these next two subjects here, which talking about which draft player really fixes our team's biggest need. For me, Joe, it's Christian Barrimore, the defensive tackle out of Alabama. If you watch this guy in the national championship, if you watch him all throughout the season, just wrecking fools. I mean, this guy was just going out there and doing this thing. And I think it's totally a different game in the NFL. We understand that. I mean, the offensive line are bigger, more athletic. And it's just a different game. But a guy that's 6'5", 310, has had 8 sacks this last year with the Crimson Tide. You just saw a guy that really gets after it. Learned a lot from his first year, in which he only had 2 sacks and 6 tackles for loss. But he came back his sophomore year, played in 11 games, had 9.5 tackles for loss, and 8 sacks, 3 passes defensed, 37 total tackles. Like, if you just watch tape, the one thing that stood out for me with Christian Barrimore, he's athletic, but he's just disruptive. He seems just to be always in the backfield making a play. And that's the kind of player the Vikings need to be able to continue to make those plays and do their thing, because I think Christian Barrimore is severely underrated. And I think he could be a defensive tackle that potentially, and when I say underrated, he should be a top 10, like be in consideration for a top 10 pick for the way he played this year. So, and I think just by the way, now I know people are going to say, oh, Davio Nixon, Marvin Wilson. We'll get into all that a little bit later. Give me a second here, people, because at the end of the day, the Vikings have to take a chance on a guy like Christian Barrimore as well. I think he has to be their first pick, and then you can go offensive guard or trade up and do whatever you want, because I think there's still some valuable offensive linemen that are really promising this year and really could do some damage. So without that, what draft player to you, from the research that you've done, things that you've seen, because you watch a lot of college football too. So which player through the draft do you think would really help out the Cowboys the most?
Of the picks I've seen, I've kind of quantified it against a lot of what other bloggers and sports writers have talked about for the Cowboys. I think as important as a corner, which I don't think we need to draft, and a safety, which I think we potentially could draft, but don't necessarily need to. An edge rusher is the most interesting position. And a lot of people have edge rusher as their pick for the Cowboys. We have the 10th pick in this draft, which is pretty good. That's Vikings have the 14th.
14th, yep.
It really depends like who's going to be on the board, because this seems like it's an odd year for drafts. I mean, there's a couple of big quarterbacks, but there aren't a ton of the big skill guys. It's mostly about line play. It seems this draft is about for a lot of people. Gregory Rousseau, who's a defensive end from Miami, is really fantastic. Probably won't be there by the time the Cowboys get their pick, but you never know. That's kind of like a in an ideal situation. Let's see, not him. Let's see, Carlos Basham Jr. I wanna Basham. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing right, from Wake Forest. I didn't see a lot of him this year. They're not a team I follow, but he's ranked really highly, and just had a good year for the Demon Deacons. If are they still called that?
I think so.
Yeah, it's tough. There aren't a lot of star guys that I know that during the season I was like, that's the dude. But hopefully the talent scouts for the Cowboys have a better sense about it than I do. One would hope. But I feel like a defensive end, a really special pass rusher, in the variety of a Gregory Rousseau or Basham Jr.
Those
are the types of guys. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I looked at guys like, Basham, Basham, I think is actually how you say his last name. He had a very strong Senior Bowl. If you look at highlights from him from the Senior Bowl, he's very active with his hands, very quick, has the size that you want in a guy, and I think he could be a special player too. Even a guy like, I think Kwity Paye would be a guy that the Cowboys definitely need to look at, a guy from Michigan. And through the years, Kwity Paye, I feel like Kwity Paye is one of those guys. He's got a really cool name, but also as he went through college, as he went through Michigan, you saw a player that just developed into not only just a good pass rusher, but also a player that you saw could also get it done in the run game. You talk about setting the edge. You talk about making sure you're not being pushed around, taking on double teams. I mean, a guy that had 11.5 career sacks for Michigan. Now, he's not Chase Young. Okay, we understand that he's not one of the most intriguing defensive line prospects to come out in a while, but he is intriguing. You talk about a guy that's 6'4", 270, that coming off the edge, had 4.5 tackles for losses last year. Only played in 4 games, had 2 sacks. I think he opted out due to COVID from my memory. But at the end of the day, even a guy like Kwity Paye, I think, would be another edge rushing prospect that the Cowboys should definitely, because he's probably going to be anywhere outside of the top 10. I'm not sure if he's going to be a top 10 pick, but he's probably, in my mind, the best defensive end prospect here in this draft, to be honest with you. So that's at least my takeaway from it. Now, I
would agree. I just don't think he'll be available at 10. I think he'll go before that. Could be wrong, but or I think the Cowboys might also be. Jerry's too dumb to pick that. That might be more accurate.
I think here's the thing, though. I think it really depends on what happens with the 4 top quarterbacks. It really does. It depends on. I've heard rumors that Trevor Lawrence isn't going to go first, which is absurd. I think that the Jaguars can't mess this up. They have to take Trevor Lawrence here. But I've also heard that they're looking at other quarterbacks, guys like Zach Wilson and all these other quarterbacks, these top 4 quarterbacks. When you consider, at the end of the day, they can't miss out on Trevor Lawrence. I think he's too special of a player, even guys like Trey Lance. I know he's also got a big arm. He's an athlete as well, but I think he's just too good of a player to miss out on. Is Lawrence rather? So now we're going to talk about our top 3 players that are our team's biggest need, and I'll go first here because now I originally kind of wanted to go guard here because the Vikings have had a problem with the interior offensive line for a long time, almost, it feels like. Even guys like Nick Easton, I liked him, but he wasn't like a permanent fix. I think it's legitimately been since Steve Hutchinson era that the Vikings have had a perennial Pro Bowl guard that truly is able to hold down the fort, pull a pass block, the entire thing, and just looks good doing it. So I think that from the top to bottom, the Vikings have just struggled when it comes to finding interior. I would say interior offensive line help. So I'm actually going to go. You can do this if you want, but I personally want to do it both through the draft and through the just free agency, the top 3 players that we need. But I'm going to go defensive tackle here. I think at the end of the day, yes, Kwity Paye, not Kwity Paye, K'Wan Short rather, and Ndamukong Suh are the top 2. But I even consider a guy like Roy Robertson Harris from the Bears. I've watched him, just what he's done from the Bears, and he's developed into a very nice player. And I think, at the end of the day, if you can get a guy like Robertson Harris for relatively cheap and find ways to address other needs, I think that's the biggest thing is, getting him in relatively cheap, finding a way to get it done, because I think he is a special player. And at the end of the day, I think the Vikings need to take care of some of these issues rather cheap because they don't have a ton of cap space, and I think they're probably going to have to get rid of a ton of guys before they can make any surmountable amount of cap space available. So I think the top 3 players in terms of free agency, the top 3 defensive tackles for the Vikings are as follows: K'Wan Short, Ndamukong Suh, and Roy Robertson Harris. And I want to hear about guys like Emory Jones, from the Jaguars, or Lawrence Guy from the Patriots, or Daquan Jones from the Titans. No, it's K'Wan Short, and Ndamukong Suh, and Roy Robertson Harris. When you're talking about 2 guys in Short and Suh who are making plays, still getting it done. But Robertson Harris is a guy that I think could definitely come on and still, at 28 years old, I think he's a guy you can get 3 or 4 more years out of. Shelby Harris was an honorable mention here, but he's 30, had 3 sacks last year. Now, he's definitely not slowing down, but it's just interesting to see what the Vikings do here. He could probably be a guy that finds his way to the Vikings. But at the end of the day, the Vikings need to find a way to sign an effective defensive tackle rather cheap and find a way to fill that, one of those holes at least from that perspective. Now, through the draft, this one was harder because I think when you're talking about the Vikings as a team that needs defensive tackles, I would say they should potentially bring in 7 defensive tackles. That's how many defensive tackles they need to bring in. Just find somebody that can play 2 gaps, rush the quarterback, and maybe have some semblance of a pass rush. Because I've watched it for too long this season. Without Linval Joseph, I knew it was going to be tough. But in terms of the draft, I think it goes Christian Barrimore, Jalen Twyman, who I fell in love with immediately. When you talk about it, I mean, his hand usage, he's not great in terms of overall getting after the passer, in the run game, but he's great at getting after the passer. And you talk about a guy who this year was a little bit undersized in that 290 range, and usually as a defensive tackle, whether it's 3-tech or you're playing a little bit more nose, you're probably going to be about 330. That's probably what I would like, but most people would like, But a guy in Jalen Twyman who had 10.5 sacks his sophomore year this year, who's putting on, you can just tell this guy's he's ripped, 290. I think at 3-tech, disruptive, great hand usage, athlete, goes out and gets it. Jalen Twyman is the number 2 need for the Vikings in terms of the draft. And it starts with Christian Barrimore. But the third one, this was tough for me because I feel like 2 players that could really fill this role at number 3. The top 3 players that could fix this big teams through the draft. Tadarius Slayton, the defensive tackle out of Florida, or Marvin Wilson, the defensive tackle out of Florida State. And I think at the end of the day, either one would be fine with me, but I'm probably leaning a little bit more towards Slayton because he's that big guy, 6'3", 6'4", 343 bills, 3. That's what you want. You want a run-stuffing defensive tackle. You go get a guy that is just 330, just standing in your face, gets it done. That's what I want. The Vikings, I think, if they were going to target Slayton, probably in that 4 to 6 range in terms of rounds, 4 to the 6th round, probably around there. He might be worth a 3rd-round draft pick. He really might, but I think that's probably where the Vikings, because this is a pretty deep draft in a lot of positions. And arguably, I was listening to the Purple Wind podcast last week, and he made the argument that it's one of the could probably be in the argument for a more deeper wide receiver class than last year, which is crazy because there was a lot of wide receivers in last year's draft that were very respectable. But this is a deep draft, and I think the Vikings definitely, in terms of those 3 players, I talk about Christian Barrimore, Jalen Twyman, but I think it all starts and ends with a guy like Tadarius Slayton, that they definitely need to find a way to get one of those 3 players, or possibly 2 out of those 4 that I mentioned, because defensive tackle is a major need for the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, that all makes a lot of good sense. When it comes to my team, it's a little more complicated. Number 1 issue is the quarterback needs to be signed.
Absolutely.
And at this stage in the game, with the crazy man at the levers of control, we don't know if that quarterback's going to be Dak Prescott, if he's going to attempt to trade up and get one of these top 4 quarterbacks we talked about being in a draft. We don't know if there could be some wild trade. There's still a couple. The chances of Deshaun Watson somehow getting let go from Houston and traded to Dallas are very low. But who knows in this crazy mixed up world? Trying to think if there are any. Pretty much everybody else has been traded off now. That's a free agent. But quarterback's number 1. I want it to be Dak, but the longer this goes on, I wonder what's going to happen with that. Cornerback then needs to be addressed. I'd love for it to be Patrick Peterson. Obviously, that's the fantasy. Or I would take a free agent safety. There's Anthony Harris, who from Minnesota. What's that? Are you cutting out?
No, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
I was just checking something out. Sorry.
No worries. Anthony Harris, Ricardo Allen, Trey Boston. Again, the question is this a long-term investment, or are we tilting for a Lombardi Trophy this year? Are we, all the chips on the table, so to speak? And then I think so. I hope our quarterback issue can be resolved within the team, and if not, then it's the draft. For cornerback, I think it needs to be done through free agency, like I've said before, and then for defensive end, I would draft. And again, an ideal pick would be a Gregory Rousseau, but there's lots of edge rushers in this draft that have a lot of potential that we've talked about already. So
I will also
beat it to death.
I do have to agree with you on this though. Gregory Rousseau, I watched a lot of tape on him because he was guys who mocked a lot to the Vikings because he played both tackle and at Miami, and he is by all means, I mean, just a freak when you terms of a height weight guy. But at the end of the day, if you watch him, Gregory Rousseau is, in my mind, I feel like he is almost. He reminds me a lot of guys in the NFL that are those big rushers, like Solomon Thomas for the 49ers back in those days. But he's a guy that if you watch just from a pure size perspective, he's almost unlike anything I've ever seen. A 6'7", 265, 6'7". I think he was a basketball player there for a second. 6'7", 265 pound guy, had 15.5 sacks. This back in 2019 for the Hurricanes, 19.5 total tackles for loss, 54 tackles. But if you just watch his tape, I am enamored by the way this man moves and uses his hands. And he's got a bob swat, and then he's gone. Like that's literally his move. It's his bread and butter, and he's great at it. And you know what? The last time I checked, sometimes the best defensive ends or best defensive pass rushers, that is, they have one move that works for them, and that's all they need. And as they go through the NFL, you guys look like there's a lot of guys you could name off through, but like guys like Dwight Freeney, who had that classic spin move. There's throughout the years they develop all these other pass rush moves, but they've got one main bread and butter. Even I had one in college; it was just a speed rip, and I was by. And if you can have a guy that is really good at one specific move, and he does that very well. You know what? I think that could be great. So Gregory Rousseau, I think going to the Cowboys would be a very dangerous thing because, again, he can play in and he can play outside too. And I think he would be a scary mismatch for a lot of the offensive linemen. So that's a very good thing to look at. But what about in your mind, this Dak Prescott thing? I think we need to touch on this because the day after it happened, I knew I couldn't talk to you about it for like at least 3 weeks, maybe 4 if I remember it, a full month, because just to have how it went down with a guy like that.
It's weird because you passed me every morning in the office, so that made it awkward.
Yeah. I just knew that I'm like, just let him go. I'm a Vikings fan. I know what it's like to be disappointed. So how much of a priority to you, should the Cowboys put into re-signing Dak Prescott?
I still have faith in him, and I think that he has the goods to be the man. I think he deserves to win a Super Bowl. I don't know if that's the case, but it feels that way with him. I've been a fan of his since he stepped up in that preseason game against Los Angeles in the Coliseum, his rookie year, after the starting quarterback and the backup quarterback both got injured in the preseason, and he stepped up out of nowhere and had that amazing rookie season, and he's had up seasons and down seasons. I think he's been consistent the whole time, and his numbers have, especially his 2019 numbers. I mean, I think we talked about this some last year, but he had one of the most insane statistical. Well, he had an insane statistical season this year, and he only played 3 games. It took until like week 7 or 8 until any other quarterback had his kind of numbers. Which, when it's him just willing this team to victories over and over, like I'm going to throw this word out one more dumb time. That's what a transcendent quarterback is. Like that's what you want. And I I don't understand every interpersonal thing between Jerry Jones and Dak Prescott and their respective camps, and there's all this stuff with, Miller Lite is the official beer of the Dallas Cowboys, and Dak just signed a big contract with Budweiser. Mm-hmm. So it's I don't know what kind of statement that's supposed to make. I feel like it's supposed to make some sort of statement to the people involved. But as a player, as a leader, as the face of that team, I want him around. I want him around for the next 5 years. I want him to get a ring. As much as I want it to be a ring for my team and to be a flex on all the other teams that I've had to listen to clown us for 26 years or however long it's been since we've won anything meaningful. And reasonably so. We deserve to be clowned on, and when we win again, we'll be the worst. We'll put the Steelers and the Pats fans to shame with how awful we'll be. I recognize that. But as much as I want the Cowboys to win a Super Bowl, I want Dak Prescott to win a Super Bowl.
Yep.
The same way I wanted, I mentioned it, but Kurt Warner to win a Super Bowl when he did with the Rams. I like his story. I like him personally. I like his style of play. Yep. This account stands Dak Prescott, and I think he's the way to go. I think there's a lot of attractive prospects out there in the draft. And if Deshaun Watson played for any other team other than the team that's not the Oilers, Dallas might be a good fit for him. Because I've been a big Deshaun Watson fan. I was a Deshaun Watson fan when he was at Clemson, and have wished better for him in Houston. I could do for a lot of Houston players, that's my quarterback take. I will take any elite defensive player that's available in the draft or in free agency just to light the spark. Whether it's a middle linebacker or a defensive tackle or a cornerback or a safety, there's enough talent in there that we just kind of need that one dude, ideally two, but I think just one would make an impact. The one player I don't want is J.J. Watt.
Ooh, that's perfect segue into our next thing here. Why, number one, and number two, what?
Number one, I don't think it would happen. Houston just doesn't trade players with Dallas.
He was released, just to let you know. He was released.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I think JJ Watt is a very brand conscious player. He's conscious of his public brand. I think if you watched the season of Hard Knocks,
yep,
that was filmed in Houston 3 or 4 years ago. It's very easy to get a sense of that. And that's fine. It's his career, and he's looking out for, I would assume, he just wants to be John Cena when he's done in the NFL, because that's kind of how he portrays himself as a player already. I respect that. I don't think it would. I don't know. I've got a lot of hot takes on J.J. Watt, but they're not all totally football related. I will tell you this: I've seen Tony Romo scramble out of a J.J. Watt. J.J. Watt have both his arms on Tony Romo, and Tony Romo was able to pirouette out of that. This is about 6-7 years ago. I'll maybe post the highlight in the comments or something. Yeah. And that was when Watt was in his prime. I think he's not quite over the hill. I think he could have the kind of career, we talked about Ndamukong Suh. I think he could go somewhere and plug in and kind of support and also ride the bandwagon into a playoff run and a Super Bowl run for a couple of teams. Yep. Just for some, I just don't see it happening in Dallas unless his animus towards Houston is so. And I know he loves that fan base. I know he loved that city, and he, was a vocal supporter of it during various natural disasters. I think he has enough respect for the Yep. fans that he wouldn't go to Dallas because I think that would be kind of a kick in the teeth to the fans. That's why I think of it first and foremost. I also think that unless Jerry's trying to plug together this kind of Avengers super team, like the Bucks did, where they just got a bunch of rejects from that were talented rejects from a bunch of other teams and slapped together this Super Bowl juggernaut, which I still don't know if Jerry's going to try to do that like he used to do in days of yore. I think the most likely I've heard Cleveland talked about as a destination for Watt, which is possible, and I think that could help make them a Super Bowl contender. Mm-hmm. Maybe just an AFC championship contender. Maybe Super Bowl contender is too much to expect for Cleveland, but who knows? I'd like to see him go to Jacksonville. That's been talked about quite a bit. I think that would allow him to stick it to the Houston organization without sticking it to the Houston fans nearly as much as going to Dallas would. Even though Jacksonville's a divisional rival, but I don't think Houston fans hate the Jaguars nearly as much as they hate the Cowboys. Mm-hmm. And I would hope they don't. I would be a little offended if they didn't. And maybe there is some more animus there, but I feel like their rivalry with Tennessee and with Indianapolis is greater in that division than with Jacksonville, because Tennessee being the former Houston team.
Yep.
So Jacksonville's my hopeful pick. I think from a kind of a marketing standpoint, Green Bay would be the perfect place to go for him because he's a Wisconsin boy, and the fans there would love it. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that ownership group is willing to make that kind of like big name acquisition. Mm-hmm. Because I feel like JJ Watt's the kind of guy who's smart enough that he could take a pay cut to go to Green Bay and tilt for a Super Bowl, and just make just get a really good set of endorsements with like PBR and Johnsonville Brats, and shore up his funds that way. And it would just be an insufferable combination of all that Scotty stuff. But it's a need that, as much as the Packers probably need a little more on offense, we've talked about this in the previous episode that I was on. A star defensive player like JJ Watt would be a big deal for them, and I think that's an ownership group that considers jersey sales as much, if not more so, than they consider winning a Super Bowl. I think they're content. We talked about this a little bit before, but I think that's an organization that's content to win a Super Bowl every 10 to 15 years, as long as they're in contention all the time. Mm-hmm. But winning it all they just don't want to be at the bottom of the division like they were in the 80s and half the 90s when nobody cared about them, and actually a lot of the 70s too. But
well, I think here's the thing. I get the whole JJ Watt to the Packers rumors and the love for that.
Yeah, it's wish fulfillment.
It is, but at the same time, I don't know if I see it. I mean, they've got Preston Smith, they've got Zadarius Smith, they've got Kenny Clark. So as much as I think it would make a lot of sense, I just don't know how much sense it would actually make, So I think, it would be interesting. It really depends on what the Packers are willing to do with Preston Smith, because they're not letting Zadarius Smith walk. They're not letting Kenny Clark walk. I believe he just signed a contract extension. So at the end of the day, it has to come down to who they are willing to pay, who they're willing to bring in, and let's stay there. So I think J.J. Watt really needs to go to the Arizona Cardinals. I think he has to reunite with DeAndre Hopkins. He will get combined with Chandler Jones, that young defense that's up and coming. Budda Baker's one of the best safeties. I got to go on a little bit of tangent here for a second, and I'll go back into this whole thing. Budda Baker has been one of the best safeties in the entire NFL for a long time. I mean, you talk about a guy that has over 440 career tackles in the last 4 years. 4 years, 400 tackles. I mean, come on, 100 tackles a year. That's very impressive. Yeah. Yes. And you talk about a guy who, in his, I believe, in his rookie year, came out, did this thing, only allowed 27 receptions on 38 targets, 72.5 PFF grade. You go to the next year, a guy that came out now a little less, but had 81 total tackles. I believe that was tied for first in the NFL, 65.9 PFF grade. This last year, before he got his 2019, before he got his contract extension, 71.4 PFF grade, allowed 36 catches off 47 targets. First in solo tackles with 120. Then you come back this year, got his first 2 picks. Now, I will say that we had talked about the Budda Baker contract extension. I was a little shocked because you think his safety would be a guy that just comes and gets a lot of picks, but that's not all it's about. It's about you shutting down people, shutting down players that are and quarterbacks that are trying to throw on you, and that's exactly what Budda Baker does. So put some respect on Budda Baker's name. He is one of the best safeties in the NFL, and he has been so for a lot of people, for a long time. Excuse me.
Yeah, could I stick a pin on that? I was, as soon as you brought him up, I was like, wow, I feel like I had to hear his name a lot this year. And then I remember Cowboys played the Cardinals on Monday Night Football, and I had to hear his name a lot that game. Just dredged it up on Wikipedia. He had the forced fumble against Zeke, sacked Dalton once, and had an interception off Dalton during the 38-10 win. I had shut out a lot of that game, just that's how I repress trauma. And just hearing the name Budda Baker echo through my skull, I'm like, that's he's amazing. He wasn't just amazing in that game, but when those Cardinals got a rare Monday night appearance and he showed up, and yeah, he definitely deserves some respect on his name. Just wanted to
thank you
dot
for
that I for you.
Yes, it adds context. I appreciate it. Now I should probably get back to my main point here, but the Arizona Cardinals need to go after J.J. Watt. Reunite him with a young quarterback. Reunite him with DeAndre Hopkins. Reunite him with a defense that really needs a true leader other than Chandler Jones. If you put J.J. Watt on that squad, you find a guy that goes out there, gets it done, leads by example. I think J.J. Watt should definitely take this one into consideration, and it should be very big moving forward. So the Cardinals definitely need to do their best to sign J.J. Watt because he is a game-changing player, and I think it would be a great fit for the former Wisconsin Badger.
Yeah, no, I that's a really good pick. I think he would have the most impact on that team. He'd make an impact wherever he went, but tilting towards a playoff something, making enough of a splash in the playoffs that you can sneak into the Super Bowl, because that seems to be the best way to do it.
Yep, it's the goal. It really is.
Yeah, coming out of nowhere. We've seen it so many times. So yeah, I hadn't even thought of that, and it's a fantastic fit. So it probably won't happen. Go to the Jets or something.
Sign a $50 million a year contract with the Jets. No, I think we need to wrap it up with our last segment here with promising players from the Cardinals and from the Chargers rather. So we'll start with the Chargers. We'll start with you, Joe. Can you kind of just start by telling me a promising player from the Chargers that you have noticed that really deserves some recognition?
Well, he's not a unknown player, certainly. He's maybe one of the most prominent players on the team, but I want to eat some crow about Justin Herbert. Because I said at the beginning of last season, and what little I had seen of him was his Rose Bowl win for the Ducks against Wisconsin, which I liked the fact that he beat Wisconsin. That's always fun to watch. But that game I watched in its entirety, and then I watched a good amount of tape of him during the draft, what they show. And I didn't think he would do as well in the NFL as he has.
Mm-hmm.
And what I really like about him going forward is it doesn't seem like a case of you get some quarterbacks that light it up in their rookie season, and then defenses have a year's worth of tape to look at, and then their sophomore season in the league, they're beatable.
Yep.
We've seen this story, countless examples, and going forward, I feel like Justin Herbert's just got like the way he plays is a good way to grow within the NFL.
Yep. Just
in terms of his style of play. So, and good for the Chargers. Good for him. I stand corrected. It's been cool to watch, and I think in a division where everybody's kind of an up and comer except for Kansas City, I'm really standing by this prediction, and I'll bring it up again in August or September. I don't think Kansas City is going to have a great 2021 season. I don't think they'll make the playoffs. And I think a lot of that's the Super Bowl hangover. A lot of that's their strategic advantage all the other teams are going to have with that Super Bowl. Like that's the game plan for how you want to just keep them from scoring, keep that KC offense from doing anything pretty much. And I think the Raiders will be better. I think the Chargers will be better.
Absolutely.
I don't know about the Broncos.
Who knows?
I don't think anyone knows about the Broncos. They're a team that could go could win 75% of their games or 5% of their games. There's no telling.
Well, I think the thing with the Broncos is I think they've got to find out what the thing about Drew Lock, because they've got weapons. We just put a video out of them having possibly one of the greatest supporting casts in the entire NFL. But they've got weapons to me. But it's answering the most important question, which is Justin Herbert. They played a game without a quarterback on the roster this year, so they deserve some respect in that regard. Like they got it done. But I'm going to go back to your Justin Herbert thing here. The Chargers made 2 first-round draft picks this last year in the 2020 NFL draft. Justin Herbert, which is clearly going to be the most talked about guy with the 6th overall pick, and some guys that are looking like geniuses because of that draft pick. But also, got to give some respect to the other draft pick here. Kenneth Murray, the linebacker out of Oklahoma. He's a guy. This is why I have mixed feelings about PFF, because they wanted him to come in and immediately be a guy that would just come out and do things, and he has absolutely done that. 6'2", 243, first-round selection, 23rd overall. Kenneth Murray, 54.4 PFF grade this year, but over 100 tackles this year. And I think it all stems down to the fact that you really have to look at a guy who made 107 tackles this last year, had a sack as well. You bring in these young players. He's only 22. You bring in these young players that are immediately going to come out and have these type of seasons. And I think I said this in our a couple of videos ago. The Chargers could be a playoff team very soon. You guys, we just put out that video on our YouTube channel. You guys can also check that out. But they got Linval Joseph this last year from the Vikings. They've got a lot of Nasir Adderley, who's another guy that I really liked. Michael Davis, who's going to be a free agent, but I think they're probably going to see what they can do to get him back. But Kenneth Murray is a young, electrifying rookie linebacker out of Oklahoma that I think is going to do some things. And I think it's really easy to see, that are really easy to take a stat like 100 tackles and say, oh, he's going to come out. But I think that if you saw what this man did when he was at Oklahoma as well, I think you're going to see that it really matches up with what I'm saying. So I'm going to go over his career over here at Oklahoma real quick. Do
we have to?
Oh, I'm sorry. I know you're a Texas guy. I just got to kind of bring it up for context. A guy that had 150 tackles his sophomore year, 4.5 sacks, 12.5 for loss, came back his junior year, over 100 tackles, only played in 14 games, 102 tackles, 17 for loss, and 4 sacks. So you're clearly college in the NFL. We know it. It's the most talked about thing. It's one of the most. It's so different. It really is. But for how much of a powerhouse that Oklahoma is, and a good team that they are, Kenneth Murray is going to be a great player to watch moving forward, and I think he's going to be something that Chargers fans should be very, very excited about. So let's go over here. Now let's talk about another promising player, this time from the Cardinals. I'll start here because I've been pushing it off on you all day, Joe. I'm going to take this one from you. Take a little bit of that pressure off for you, but because at the end of the day, we're not trying to put too much on you. So, but for me, I wanted to go with Budda Baker, but we already went with my rant about Budda Baker. But for me, there's a lot of players that the Cardinals have recently brought in. When you talk about DeAndre Hopkins, that are exciting and that are, but they're not young. And that's the main purpose of this, is to really find a young player. I have to go with their first overall pick, Isaiah Simmons. Now, I have to preface this by saying he did have a rough go around for the first, I would say, first couple of months. It was rather rough for him. However, a former guy that ran a 4.3 at the combine, that's 6'4", 240 pounds. I mean, the ceiling is bright. Finished the year with 43 tackles, 2 sacks, a forced fumble, and a pick. So you saw a guy that I think his PFF grade at one point was in the low 30s, and that's pretty not great. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, but I think as a guy that you saw go throughout the year, learn the ins and outs of the game, especially at that linebacker position, being of this guy that's 6'4", 230, running that speed, and it finishes the season with nearly a 60.0 PFF grade. That's incredible to go from low 30s to 60. I mean, he just started balling for the Cardinals, and he is definitely worth that 8th overall selection I'm seeing so far, the former Clemson Tiger that is. So come out, he's only 25 and a half years old to this point. I think Isaiah Simmons is going to be a monster moving forward for the Cardinals. And I think, we already talked about it with if they were to somehow acquire J.J. Watt, but I mean, their entire defense. I mean, Chandler Jones. I mean, there's a lot of defense. Budda Baker. So at every level of this defense, they have a playmaker, a young playmaker that can come out and do some things. So I think this Arizona Cardinals defense, this team is going to really take off really soon. And it's because of players like Isaiah Simmons and Budda Baker and so forth.
Yeah. I'm in total agreement with you. I mean, just going through that, Cardinals defense, they're really stacked. That's why and there's still a few questionable, will Patrick Peterson stay? There's some talk that he might. Mm-hmm. It's hard to, we already put respect on Budda Baker's name, but I have to go with that. They made it, they had a draft. They had a good draft last year and some good rookies, but they didn't make a huge impact. And they had let me see here, Rashard Lawrence at
If I took yours, I'm so sorry.
No, you didn't. I just lost my page because I had two. He's a defensive lineman. He was at LSU. He's the captain of that national championship defense. And he didn't have a huge impact this season. So hopefully for them, these guys that they invested in will step up to the example put forth by the kind of, I mean, it's weird to call Budda a veteran after just 3 seasons, but he is. So, they've got a lot of upside on that defense. You could make an argument for young Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm not gonna. I think he's an example of a guy whose number will be a little easier to figure out the following season. But I don't know. Sometimes the little guys can make an impact at quarterback, whether it's Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers. I'm just kidding. He's only 6 feet. He is 6 feet tall, which is not only, that's not short, but he doesn't like being called short. So I just like to stick that in there every once in a while. We barely talked about the overall conference of the NFC West, but the Chargers the Cardinals prospects are good there.
Absolutely.
The players we talked about.
So, yeah, I absolutely agree. I think, I even put out a video a while ago that's, I believe it's over 2,000 views now. That's done pretty well because, I think people are starting to recognize, this Cardinals team is legit. And I think that their defense is going to be a major portion of that. And they got a franchise quarterback, or what seems to be a franchise quarterback at this time as well. So, but we're going to get out of here, but we cannot go anywhere again, without saying thank you again, Joe, the real Cowboys fan brings it, shows it, does it. We appreciate you for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me. Thank you to Chelsea way back when for the kind word. It's good to hear from her. Yeah, it's always a pleasure. Love being here and love listening to the show, even when I'm not on it.
Yeah, and we'll definitely have him back on the future, especially for draft reactions, and and we're going to continue to bring on fans of NFL teams that really have a different perspective and also really just think what their team should do heading into the draft and free agency. So we're going to continue to bring you that. But I'll make sure, once again, for those of you that watch us on YouTube and everything, like and subscribe down below. Visit our website at thesportsbpodcast.com and our email at thesportsbp@yahoo.com. But other than that, I think that's all I got. I pray you guys have a great rest of your weekend, a great day. And as always from Miss Jill, peace out.